Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet. Yesterday was an extremely eventful day in the Manchester United news space as United push ahead on essentially getting all their deals for summer lined up. And so today I wanted to run through a lot of the deals that are out there, the things that are ongoing, and discuss why, what they look like, and go through them again in a little bit more succinct than the hour and a half live that we did yesterday. Though it was a really nice live to hang out, and a lot of news was kept kind of coming in as we were going. So I wanted to do that. Before we get started on that, one of the things I wanted to point out to some of the detractors, but maybe some people who have some doubts or things like that, or people think maybe I'm being too generous at times with Ineos or with the management of things presently. I will remind you, if you go back to January and into early February, I mentioned that quite a few times that look, not only one, can they only afford the types of transfers that we're looking at right now simply because of the decisions that they've had to make that have not been easy when it comes to things like jobs, when it comes to things like cuts, when it comes to things like, obviously the redundancies and the changes that they've made across the board. You have to bear in mind all of this, what we're going to discuss here, is possible because of that. Quite literally, United are set to, if they miss out on Europe, lose about 50 to 60 million in revenue. Um, and they were already losing money. With the wages saved, they would really have only ended up breaking even on those losses and still be behind the eight ball. That being said, with the other additional savings that have been made, and from what I can gather, it's probably more than what they are initially projecting, probably somewhere in the range of 60 to 80 million a year on the costs to run the club in the present. This is really what is opening the door for United to be able to get deals done. I will also state, and I know it's a very contentious subject still, but it is worth bringing up because I think it's important that whether you agree or disagree with them doing it, it's important to see, did they succeed in the outcomes that were sort of being said. When I said I wanted to see it as well, I said, look, yes, I understand these cuts. I understand they're unpopular. Explain them. But for me, it was, if it results in them doing the things they have to do, then it's understandable. Then it's not, the accusations like people are just trying to pocket the money, or, you know, they're making savings because they don't want to spend anything. I think it's important always to be fair and understood on this. And to me, it was very clear based on the conversations I've had exactly what was happening. Um, so, you know, now we're kind of starting to see that. Now they still have to execute. The other thing that was important is come February, after the January window, I said, look, they're actually lining everything up now. They want to execute everything very early. They intend to fully back Amarim in the summer, give him plenty of money to spend. Over the last month, I've been talking about 80 to 100 million as to what they can spend and where they want to prioritize that in the front line. So that leads us essentially to where we want to go. But first, a slightly different topic, a slightly different one. This is a really interesting name here. This is a really interesting signing that I'm quite excited about United doing these sorts of deals. One of the things that we've been talking about is the intention to do more Kone type signings, to make more Diego Leon signings, and that we very likely be getting two or three more. And in specific, that we were looking at some African players, young African players who are playing in the French league, where Vivel have felt that there is a lot of talent available. And on that basis, United have moved forward with the signing of Enzo Canabic. He is a young Cameroonian player playing in France at Le Havre, where we signed Paul Pogba from. He is still playing with the under-19s as of now, but essentially the story so far, and it comes from this source. It comes from Tanzi Loic as well. Really good sources in France that this is the case. Now, if we look at some of the info, some of the numbers on him, he's playing in the under-19s level. I think he's been moved up fairly quickly, but statistically, 8 goals, 1 assist, and in 1,100 minutes. He's got a good record for that. And obviously, it's so hard to judge players at a young age. And I can't say any of us have really watched him, but he's 18. Um, and as it says here, he's intending to go on loan to Lausanne next season. Now, of course, we cannot loan players to Nice because we are transfer banned between the two clubs due to the participation in Europe all the way through January. So if you're wondering why not Nice, why wouldn't we send him there? Then you know that's essentially the reason why. Um, you can see here it says he's got a bunch of family members who have played, and some are presently in different academies and things like that. Apologize if any of my pronunciations are not perfect on this, on any of this, but yeah, I can't say I know much about him entirely, but he's free as well, and that's obviously part of the point. He's out of contract this summer, so we can sign him. We can agree a deal now, and he can join us. And so I think that's one of the things where we look at it and say, yeah, this is what we want to do. This is what we want to see. We want to see these types of players where we start loading up with young talent across the board. And when we kind of look at the squad later, it'll start to become apparent why we're doing this, where these players, they kick on, we can bring them in, we can loan them out, we can sell. Gives us a lot more flexibility there. But that is number one. I mentioned it on Saturday because I had a very strong belief that it would be a deal we would be pursuing and had a good chance of happening. Today, it looks like it is happening and that we have made that deal happen. Exactly what we wanted. A young striker to come in. We wanted to add that to, the record and get another one of a player like him in the squad. And yeah, as I said a few weeks ago, young African strikers in France. We're looking at them. There you have it. Looks like we've signed one. So as far as we know, this is on the verge of being completed. It's been well reported and documented in France. And yeah, and it's been reported there that it's nearly done. So it seems like we are on the cusp of getting there. As of a couple of days ago, I had heard we'd made contact, but not an offer yet. He was looking at different clubs and trying to make his decisions, but it sounds like it's been communicated to us that he wants to join us. So now they just should be finalizing the deal to get him to loan him to where he can play senior football. So that's what it looks like we are doing as of now, per our understanding of things at this point in time. Moving on to Matheus Cunha. Obviously, this was a huge subject of discussion as of yesterday for a lot of reasons. As United played against Wolves at the weekend, United held direct discussions with Cunha's camp over the weekend and in the days and on Monday, I believe, to essentially line up the deal and look at it and say, hey, we really want to sign you. What do you think about it? And the important thing here to note is that the big driving factor in this is that Cunha wants to join us. He wants to join. He wants to come into the team. He wants to join United. He really likes United. He feels it's a great club, and that's the big motivating factor here and what is kind of pushing this deal to the forefront at this point in time. Because that is obviously a major factor in us wanting to get some deals done. A while back, we decided, look, we're going to take our money, we're going to invest it in the attack. And one of the concerns that there were with someone like with someone like Delap is it enough as a goal scorer, to add to the team? And if you watch my video on the progress yesterday morning that I published with the details and information, it's absolutely shocking. United's front line, second worst in the league. But the rest of their team is fifth best in the league at scoring goals. It's quite interesting when you break it all down as to why United are struggling. Amram has mentioned a few times, and I can say for certain, for an absolute fact, and this is what we we're looking at a few weeks ago, that the view was it's the attack. We need to invest in the attack. They would rather spend all their money in the attack than anywhere else at this point in time, if needs must, to get it done. So the idea then became, okay, well, we know we're looking at 10s and we know we're looking at a striker. Who's the best we can get? And what is the best way we can spend our money? And Cunha was the one that definitely, fit the bill for this. If we look at this, I did a chart a while back on the number 10s. We can see this was about goal scoring. We can see Cunha is one of the most high volume and efficient goal scorers of all the links that we had. He was up there. He's in the middle of the pack on creativity and take-ons, a successful dribbler, nothing too crazy, and also right in the middle of the pack on carries and dribbles. Now, it's important to note that with an Amorim team, he really, really likes his 10s to be ball carriers. We've spoken about that, about the ability to dribble, the ability to carry, the ability to get the ball up the pitch from the number 10s, that they need to be willing to drop deep, but also score goals. And his two 10s are usually, one is a little more creative and one is a little more direct, and to go alongside the goal scorer. And that is Cunha in absolute spades. Now, if we look at kind of some of the stats here, interestingly, on similar players, it's a lot that we've been linked to or that we'd be happy to sign. Mbumo, Xavi Simons, a certain former United player that would be a perfect fit. Morgan Rogers, who everybody's been talking about as a perfect fit. And the reason is pretty simple. The goals, look at these goals, the goals and the dribbles, the goals and the carries, the goals and the dribbles, and a decent defensive work rate as well. If we look at his overall stats here, some of the things that stand out: fantastic shooter, just on another planet as a shooter right now. That's a good thing. Middle of the road on passing, but he does get involved. It's not like he's not involved in build-up. Interestingly, one thing I've noted about a lot of targets United have been looking at, even since last summer, is the liking of players who can hit the long pass. We know we talk about that big switch. But look, he actually does pass into the penalty area. He's actually can help with the creativity. So that is rather interesting as well. He's a decent defender. He's actually done a decent amount of work from a volume standpoint. Now, that might just be because Wolves haven't had the ball much. As a dribbler, high volume dribbler, middle of the pack winning. That's okay. When you have a high volume, being in the middle of the pack as to how successful you are is okay. High carries into the final third. So what is he going to be as a player? Carry into the final third, make something happen, score a goal. That's what we need. That's what we want. That's how they feel will help to ease the burden on the striker and add more goals to this team, because it's not just a striker. Getting a striker in is not going to fix our goal scoring issues where none of our 10s are scoring goals either. So the big factor with Cunha here is he wants to join. We know what the fee is. We're willing to pay it. We will want to do it in installments, which is totally fine. It doesn't change anything amortization-wise. And he wants to join. The contract should be no issue. That's based on the conversations that we've had. So we really do expect this one to happen. David Ornstein and some other reports as well, as good as it gets, really confirmed Cunha's the guy. We want it done early. We can get it done early, and all of that. We want to get him just set and in place so that we've got him. And that's in part because the striker situation is a little more up in the air. I'm not saying, and we'll get to that in a second, it's a little more up in the air simply because we don't have, as of yet, the same confidence that we will be chosen as we do with Cunha. In Cunha's case, essentially, as it looks, is if he wants to join, he's ours. If we can give him the offer and we put the deal on the table, he will join. So I like that. I think that he immediately makes for a perfect fit into the front three. So another striker going on loan, a young striker there, another forward coming in, starts to say, hey, we're going to have options in the next couple of years for this kind of rebuild. That brings us to Marcus Rashford. Obviously, there's been a lot of stories recently, maybe a little bit of info coming out about Rashford's intentions and what his future holds. And one of the things that, is true is that he would be willing to join back to Manchester United. Whether that's likely or not is a totally different story. He would be willing to come back. Obviously, he still loves United and has been childhood United. He's been here forever and all of that. And, that being said, at the same time, Aston Villa are very likely to want to trigger his clause, though he'll very likely have to take a pay cut. Or we'll have to pay off some salary in order to make that happen. His preference would be as well to go to Barcelona, where he has a lot of admirers, and they still really like him, and that they could potentially make a deal there. His wages might be a little less of an issue on that front. If he were to return to United, obviously would be entirely predicated on the basis of, discussions with Ruben Amorim to make things good. There would also have to very likely be a talk about, his contract and what it entails and things like that. And those kind of things. Now, Rashford does fit in really well. Him and Cunha as a kind of a 1-2 punch for providing near enough the same thing is a very valid, ideal kind of setup in that respect from a purely positional standpoint. One of the things I wanted to share on Cunha that's really important for part of the later thing is when you look at how centrally he plays. Yes, he gets out wide, but a lot in the central areas. He's made for that central number 10. You can even see it kind of keeps rating him as a striker, attacking midfielder, because he's playing so much in the middle. And I think that that is really important as a note as to the type of player he is and the type of forwards that we want. So Rashford fits that too, but obviously I think it'd be really, really difficult to imagine that he could come back. And obviously there's been nothing on Ruben Amorim's side to indicate he would, you know, change his mind at this point, but they may have some discussions come the end of the season. Um, if we didn't sell him, obviously that would very likely cut down on what we spend this summer. We're not going to be. We'll talk about the third attacking signing a little later, but we wouldn't be able to do that in the instance of Rashford staying. We're definitely fairly reliant on his wages leaving and sale from a PSR position that will enable us to do some of these things, and it affects other things as well. In the case of Delap and Osimhen, I don't believe we could afford an expensive player like Osimhen, without shedding Rashford's wages and a sale, barring Champions League and an additional sale on top of that. We need quite a lot of money. So it's a complex scenario. The most likely thing by far at this point in time, factually, is that he will leave still, and that he will leave on a permanent this summer. We may not get an enormous amount of money from it, 40 million, but there's a chance we'll have to pay off a chunk of the wages and profit from that. So regardless, we'll get some wages off. We'll probably make a little money left over. And yeah, if there's competition, then that option to buy, it may not be relevant and the price may go a little bit higher. But we will see. We will see where that kind of ends up. Some of it's up to him. Some of it's up to him in discussing with Amorim, and then obviously he'd have to decide if Aston Villa is where he wants to stay, because they definitely will be looking to trigger that. The early indications that I had were that he wouldn't want to be there, but maybe it changes. Maybe it changes based on if anybody else comes in, like Barcelona or somewhere that he would prefer comes in with an offer or not. So we'll see there, but that can have an effect on what we do in the window too. But there will be the option of Aston Villa on the table. In terms of Delap and Osimhen, I want to make clear a couple of points on this that I think are worth mentioning, which is that I've talked a lot about Osimhen, and I want it to be understood though correctly at the same time, because while I've spoken a lot about Osimhen, there is a fair bit of talk about um, you know. Obviously everybody's saying Delap's the first choice, Ornstein, Athletic, all these guys. And I'm not just, that's, again, to make it very clear, I'm not disagreeing with that or disputing it at all. Because the factor in all of this is that, how do you make a choice? What is a choice? It's when you're looking at your options, you're saying, okay, well, who's the best striker in the world? Well, maybe it's Mbappe or Haaland. Are they attainable? No. So they can't be first choice. You know what I mean? There are all the factors that come into the decision as to what is the choice that's being made, and the finances are a big part of that. The view between Delap and Osimhen is that Osimhen is a better player, but Delap is a very good young player that they really like, that they do totally admire. 30 million on a release clause. Accordingly, there might be other fees that drive that up closer to 40, but a release clause that's affordable, wages that are affordable, and a young players coming into England. So essentially on the grand scheme of things, the deal, if you were to look at it purely on like the 60 million pounds, 350,000 a week that Osimhen would demand or had been asking for beforehand, let's not say demand now, we don't know that, would amount to really, like, in total, you're probably looking at an extra cost of 50 million in total to bring in Victor Osimhen over his contract versus Delap. Delap would also potentially have that resale value. Again, the risk part of if it doesn't work out and you've only paid 30, after 2 years you sell him for 20 and you made a profit, or you've broken even at worst, right? So there's a few considerations. So when all the factors are put into place, Delap is the top choice for that reason. We are going for Delap, right? But that doesn't mean he's higher rated. It's just a matter of we can sign Delap and Cunha. We know we can do that financially. That is something we can do. And um, as they say, bird in hand is worth two in the bush. So it's like, well, should we just, if we go for Delap and Cunha and we get those done, then we've got a good striker and we've got a number 10. Now, with my concerns with Delap, I'm much more comfortable with the fact that we're going to likely get Cunha as well. The thing with Delap, the complication in this is that it's far from guaranteed at this point in time that he will choose United. We are still waiting for a decision on that. However, the club is also pushing ahead to try and essentially line the deal up and get it done, specifically so that we can force this kind of decision. I mean, we're less than potentially a month away from a Europa League final. We want to know what the decision is. If we get Champions League, that doesn't mean we won't sign Delap and Cunha. It means that we just kind of want to know, because then it would mean we have a lot more money elsewhere. So I'm trying to make it very clear that, we're not saying just because we get Champions League that we won't sign Delap anymore and he stops being a target, he stops being the top target. It's not that. On the balance of everything, it's still the more sensible target view by the club, hence the top target. But we're not sure if we can. We're not 100%, I guess, yet that he would choose United and join United. There's a lot of competition for him. But there's some good things United do have on to offer in terms of the position, the striker spot, the first choice, all of those kinds of things. But we don't have Champions League. And one of the discussions and one of the things that has been reported by a couple of people that I can't 100% confirm the veracity of is that he would like to see where everybody lands. If he's waiting to see if we get Champions League, in a situation where, yes, if United have Champions League, I'll choose them over anybody else. That's a possibility. It's that doesn't delay us, understandably, between the decision on Delap and Osimhen, because we probably need Champions League to go for Osimhen too. So we're kind of if we have to wait until that point to know, then fair enough. In the meantime, Cunha we should be able to get in general. So if we can line that up, and then we have all this here. We've had conversations with Delap's representatives. We know what it would take to sign him. It's more so in a holding pattern where we've made very clear our intentions of what we want to do. And as far as my understanding is, his way of approaching it is to lay out the options on the table and then see. Now, Chelsea feel quite confident. Chelsea feel like they have something better to offer. They feel like you will choose them. Maybe that is this thing down to Champions League. And so he maybe have communicated to us, hey, if you get Champions League, I'm choosing you 100%. Hence why we're still keeping the door, not the door on this open, but keeping him as the top choice and pushing ahead. We probably would like to get a decision sooner and just confirm it, and we will probably keep continuing to push for that. But so far, the indications are that that he'll wait, and that we're just gonna have to wait and see. So that's the unknown. Now, when it comes to Osimhen, this also gets kind of blown out of proportion. United really like him. United have made contact with his representatives. United do want to know where things stand and what a deal would look like. They have not made contract offers. They have not progressed on these deals. I don't believe the 40 million thing is accurate. I believe that United would be interested in making an offer at 40 million, but I don't believe that that means that that's something that's acceptable. But I think that that's sort of part of the balance of it, is that they would probably look to get a cut price deal if he ends up being an option that they can go for, and seeing, if that would be acceptable. But something has to give on the wages of the fee, because we're not going to pay 70 million and 350,000 a week, even with Champions League. That is extremely unlikely that we will do that. We want to have something give on either side there. So, it gets pushed far too forward about, United are almost done. United have it lined up, blah, blah, blah. No, there's been contact. They want to know the nature of the deal so that they have the scenario planned for, especially if we miss out on Delap. Can we get it done? Is that an option? So that's where things stand with Osimhen. I still think he's the perfect fit. I still have this is where I do have a slight disagreement. because from my perspective, you do whatever you can to get Cunha and Osimhen regardless. Now, if it's not possible without Champions League, that's understood, but you do whatever you can to get Cunha and Osimhen, because if you did that, they're not. It's not like they're old. You immediately have potentially the best forward line in England. I mean, think about that for a second. That sounds like a crazy phrase because of where we are in the league. But Osimhen, Cunha, and Bruno is potentially the best forward line in England. Is it not? What's better? I'm not sure. Liverpool perhaps, but Salah's getting old. But you have it for years. You have this, and you have time to line things up as well. So you do whatever it takes. You sell players. You do this. You do that. But obviously, it is more complicated to do it. But I would still have disagreement on the plan there, even though I'm more okay with Delap with Cunha. I still disagree with that plan. I still think it's a potential mistake, and that we may still end up back in the striker market. Now, we're obviously loading up, getting some other young players and things like that, like Enzo at the start, but still. I have my concerns with it, because I still think a top number 9 is the best and the most necessary position in all of football. That being said, Cunha can play there too. And that gives us flexibility, if Delap is not kicking on, that we're not completely down and out on our options. And I think Cunha would do a good job there in this system. So that's why I'm much more comfortable with Cunha in this team, in this plan, because it gives us that extra backup. Getting Victor Osimhen is predicated. When I say it's predicated on circumstances, it also doesn't mean we wouldn't go for Delap first. It's more predicated on maybe we can't get Delap. We can get Osimhen with either cut price fee or wages, Champions League, maybe a sale as well to get into that. Then the last thing I want to discuss is Matheus Cunha. I've been talking about this kid for ages, and it was almost like a joke that I kept mentioning him. Franco Matheus Cunha, he's only 17. He's 17 till August now. I could be wrong on this, but when does the transfer window end? Is it not still September 1st? September 1st. So we could sign him, but he could not join until August. So that's okay. He's a young player. It wouldn't be that big of a deal. So yes, he could still join, but it would be towards the end of the window. Now that might suit us, because frankly, the necessity of this is we will very likely have to sell to get another attacking signing in like this. Now, from a positional standpoint and all of that, again, he's 18. He's got, I think, a 45 million euros release clause. Expensive, but he is an unbelievably good young player. Could well be one of the best players in football. A Lenny Euro type level of signing. 10 goals and assists in 1,600 minutes. He's playing in top level at 17 over in Argentina. When you look at him positionally, you will understand kind of immediately why we like him. Look at this positional. He is the perfect right 10. Left-footed, does it all, creative, everything, right? So he's very much a guy that we would like to sign, but we've been watching a long time, and there's reports in the last couple of days that we're considering it, and a very good, strong report out of Argentina that we're the best positioned team to do it. But again, to make this happen, obviously we have to look at the holistic nature of the entire squad. And that's why Delap, again, in part of it. If we can get Delap and Cunha for that 90 million or so mark, and we get Champions League, well, that is going to allow us to buy more even before sales, right? So I've put together, even without major sales, of beyond what we're expecting, you could have a squad like this. If you can nail down Delap and Cunha and get Champions League, you can get Matheus Cunha in here. You can still get a young midfielder in there. I'm saying without sales or anything like that. And you're really kind of stocked up in these areas. Now, one of the things I wanted to point out about the young players is that we also have Diego Leon coming in. We have Mantato will be coming through. We've got Fredrickson potentially, who's an option in the back that will help in this position specifically, where maybe we're just a little bit short until Lissandro comes back, and then we'll see how he is. But that gives you the possibility of Amas here with Leon as a backup, Dorgu on the right, Ahmad up front. It gives you a ton of possibility. Now, the other factor in this that is quite obvious to me in looking at is that the space for um, Garnacho is diminished. And you've seen there's been a number of reports saying we'd be willing to sell him to fund further moves in the market. Um, Without Champions League, we probably won't be able to get a midfielder or another forward without selling somebody major. If we cannot get Delap and Cunha and we miss out and we need a more expensive striker and we don't get Champions League, we will absolutely have to make a sale to go for somebody bigger in that position in terms of spending. But you realize here, like, Mainu may be a 10. Ahmad may be a 10 as well. Mount is still at the team. Um, I still think Bruno will end up here. This is not considering we move on Casemiro. One of the names that we've been linked to quite a bit that I did cover in a video is Ederson from Atalanta. He's a perfect fit as a combative attacking eight who's more progressive, all of those kinds of things. There's been a little bit of talk about maybe we would go for him. I'm still not so sure we would. I think that would necessitate a sale, but there might be a young midfielder we can put in here. But you can see how the squad could take shape. This is a way that the squad could work even without with Champions League, without any major sales, or without Champions League and with the sale of someone like, Garnacho. If we were to make more sales, and again, it's flexible. It could be like this. It could be Casemiro and Ugarte. It could be another signing in here as well. We don't really know where everybody's going to play as of yet, and we'll have to kind of wait till summer to see that. Now, Bruno's been starting the last 5 or 6 games in the front line, and from a balance perspective, a direct runner, and a creator is the way. I don't think Mainu is that creator in there. Maybe when he's fully fit in summer, he'll go back to the pivot. We will see, or maybe he'll be in the 10. But that just means there's even more players in the 10, and not that much room. Maybe Bruno will be deep and he'll decide he wants a Bruno there. In that case, then yeah, potentially, who's here? Maybe it's Ahmad and you've got Dorgu on the right and Amos on the left. There's so many permutations with all the young players we kind of have coming in to make this squad work. But I think at a minimum, we could do something like this. And we'll look to it. And that's why the consideration over, the potential sale of Garnacho is there, because Cunha is essentially replacing him from a positional, stylistic standpoint with a better fit. 2 goal scorers, 1 creator. So we'll see how that goes. Mastantuono would fit in like a glove on this side to be the eventual potential kind of Bruno replacement in the front line as a creator, as an attacker, all of that. Ahmad, obviously, you have these great options there. So a lot still up in the air. If we get Delap and Cunha and we don't make any major sales and we miss out on, on everything that we intend to get, then sure, the team might look something like this. Gosh, who would I even put here? Maybe like Kone next season, then the team might look something like this. Still a big improvement in the front line, but obviously, that this is my point on it, is I think it's a big improvement in the front line, but you still are looking at your backups being Garnacho, Højlund, and Xerxes. Now, that's the trio that I said was potentially, statistically the second worst in England. Now, off the bench, I think all of them are more impactful. And so you may not be looking at it in the same vein. Then you got young players. Maybe they kick on as bench players, but we'd be much better positioned if they were all bench players than starters right now. And maybe they would then start to become fairly successful. But then you'd be looking at, okay, that's a step forward. I think that this team is good, good enough to challenge for Europa League positions. But I think that depending on injuries and things, it could get ugly, because if you miss a couple of players, you're back to a lot of the same problems that you had before. So I still think that's why they will look to a profitable sale, so that they can invest in 2 more players at minimum, a midfielder and another attacker, very, very potentially to come in. Once you do that, if you were to get a Mastantuono here, then and you have all these young options, Amos, Dorgu, Leon, Ahmad, Mentato, Dallo, you got all these players, then the next summer becomes really obvious that then it's valid. Casemiro will be leaving as a free agent to start talking about, upgrading the midfield, because then the midfield, I think, does become the spot where you want to say, do they really kick on, or do we really need to make upgrades there? And that's the biggest kind of question we have at that time. So, yeah, it is rather interesting, in this respect where we go from here. But I agree with the circumstance of getting these two things set up, and then based on Champions League or based on major sales or both, can we add another attacker? Can we add another midfielder? Or do we push that to next summer? Another attacker, another midfielder, another probably center back to replace Maguire at that time. And as I've said before, the keeper thing is very much like compartmentalized. It's its own thing. It's its own thing there. The reason I think we really do want to get another attacker in is Amram's made a big point on really wanting his wing backs to be much higher, to be more natural wingers, to be more natural attackers. It's good if we can do this and have more natural attackers forward, but you're still so short in things like the midfield that you're probably going to see Bruno here a bit, which means Ahmad will come here a bit, which means you're still going to have things like Dallo there. If you get someone like Mastantuono in or Dibbling, I think those are similar options as players. I think they're the same vein, Mastantuono or Dibbling, a young player who can play as a 10 a 10 slash, gives us additional support on that right side, then that is going to allow us to play more wingers in those positions. So we will see, but I do think that they'll want to make more sales. Now, if we miss out on Delap, we'll probably have to make sales to add in a top attacker and see how that affects everything else. I expect we will also make some additional young player signings in the same vein as this Enzo player as well. So we will see there. There's a report from Ducker at the Telegraph that says we are one of the clubs monitoring James McCarthy from City, the young player there. Now, positionally, it's an interesting one that if we were to actually go for him. Now, it doesn't say that we're the top target. It says that, if City go for Gibbs White or Wirtz, that Forest and Leverkusen are looking at him. Now, positionally, what is he? He's a left-footed forward. He would again fit right in to that. If I'm not mistaken, someone could correct me in the comments if I'm wrong on this. But if we go to McCarthy here and we look at where he plays, for the most part, he hasn't played enough, but he's a left-footed forward who would probably fit right in to this right 10 position. So there's another option. McCarthy, Mastantuono, Dibbling. Obviously, this is a position we're looking at, and it makes sense. You add in Cunha, you add in a striker. We still probably need somebody who could play, maybe so Bruno can play deep, or maybe behind Bruno and develop into that role that allows us to keep our attack the way that we want it and the way that Amram wants it, in balance. So it's starting to take shape. If you were to ask me today, Cunha and Delap and another attacker, I would say that is genuine possibility with Champions League or the sale of Garnacho. And then additionally, I think going for a young midfielder. And those, if you were to ask me the first 4 signings, it would be that we will be making this summer. And we're starting to get names for those wide positions. Delap and Cunha. Osimhen is still there. For the wide players, Dibbling, Mastantuono, and now it looks like perhaps McCarthy as an option as well, obviously, for that similar kind of position and role. And then in the midfield, anybody's guess as of now. Unless we sell Casemiro, we probably can't get somebody like Ederson to come in. So it is an interesting time, is it not? So we'll have to see. But hopefully that gives a good summary of where we are at. We do want to line these deals up. I expect that we can execute them and have deals agreed after the Europa League final. Potentially Cunha and Delap. But if we don't win the Europa League, then Cunha and it starts to get a little more questionable. It could take a little longer. We might have to make some sales to bring in some of these bigger players that we want. But I think at very least we'd like to have Cunha done and in the door. So we've got a forward that wants to join that we can rely on more than anything. Okay, that's what I have for today. Thank you for watching this video. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on. See you in the next one.